3, 2, 1, showtime. All right, Dave.
Can we kick it off?
Hit us with the intro.
Yeah, what's up, everybody? It is June 13th. We've got a big-time guest. We are super pumped about this. Probably the biggest guest we've hit on the HuskGuys podcast since we started, from Solid Verbal. We'll get a proper introduction here in a second. But before we kick things off, quick word from our sponsors. As we kick out. Actually, not sponsors. It's just us. Ty, you're new to this, but you'll appreciate this as we get an NIL conversation. We started as part of the HuskGuys business, Pipeline Jerky, named after the pipeline back when we were good at football in the 90s, but we're coming back. Pipeline Jerky is named after the dominant offensive line from the 1990s, a jerky business created in name, image, and likeness. The offensive line gets a royalty of every bag that is sold. We're having a huge Father's Day sale right now. Things are going great. We got some pipeline steaks. We got pipeline jerky. So guys, check out pipeline-jerky.com. And then also, Ty, something's coming your way if you're comfortable sharing your address at some point. But we'll send you some delicious jerky after this. And
we'll see how this goes.
As always, some HuskGuys merch. Off-season championship is well underway, as well as the Kool-Aid. So go to HuskGuysStore.com. Check it out. Get some merch. And Andrew, give me a proper introduction, because this one deserves a proper introduction.
Yeah. So around 10 years ago, I was listening to this amazing podcast. And Ty and Dan have been filling our ears, especially on around Thursdays, my college football preview every week. Every Monday and Tuesday, I'll sail the high seas with them. They put on the shows several times per week. These guys are dedicated to the craft. They know more about your own team a lot of the time than you do. They break news. They do it all. And honestly, kind of living the dream that I always thought I could live. But then I thought, this doesn't seem practical, yet somehow they've broken through. They've got a huge following. They are living the dream. They talk college football for a living. How awesome is that? This is Ty Hildenbrandt. Ty, thank you so much for joining us.
Hey, fellas. I appreciate the invite. Thank you. Thank you for having me on.
100%. So, Ty, the big thing that we kind of want to get into here to begin with, you and your co-host, Dan Rubenstein, you guys met on the field after the 2010 Texas game. First of all, tell us about how this all came about. Tell us about the Solid Verbal. And then we're going to get into kind of the game experience, because here's the cliffhanger. I was also at that game, and I was also on the field after the game. But tell me a little bit beforehand. Tell us about the Solid Verbal. Tell us what brought you guys together.
Yeah, well, the Solid Verbal started in earnest in 2008. And for people who are listening to this in podcast form or just watching somewhere on the internet, 2008 is before podcasting as a word was mainstream. Nobody really knew what that was. It was kind of this foreign concept. You couldn't go into a sports bar and say, I run a podcast, and expect to get any kind of answer. People would look at you like you had two heads. So at the time, Dan and I were both freelancing for Sports Illustrated. He was doing video work. I was writing a column. And he had shot a video at my alma mater, which is Penn State. And I was at the game, I think. It was Penn State versus Notre Dame. So I just reached out because, hey, we work for the same website. I wanted to compliment him on a job well done. And over the course of the next year or so, we kind of struck up a friendship. We had an email correspondence going. And at the time, I had done some early stuff with podcasting dating back to 2004, really, truly the early days of it. And we just kind of had this idea to, play on our shared love for college football and try to start this college football thing. And that was sort of the origin story behind the Solid Verbal. We started it in August of 2008. We've been running it continuously since then. So
It's amazing.
Yeah, it's been a long time going. The joke, though, with respect to the slide that you've got up on the screen right now, is that for the first 2-3 years, I'm not great at math, that we did the show, we didn't meet. It was entirely virtual. He was in California, I was in Eastern Pennsylvania. And through somebody who listened to the show, who at the time happened to be the video director for Nebraska football, we got press passes to come
Amazing.
to Omaha to watch them play Texas. And so, yeah, we met for the first time. Or I should say Lincoln, excuse me. We stayed in Omaha. We drove from Omaha to the game in Lincoln.
Yeah.
And that was the first time we met in 2010. And we were down on the field for a good chunk of that game. I remember distinctly there was, I think it was whoever the kicker was for Texas at the time, kicked the ball through the end zone. It was coming right to me. And I had never been on the field before for a game. And so I was terrified to try and catch it. It would have been the easiest catch in the world. But instead, I stepped aside, and whoever the dude was that was working the field goal kicking nets at the stadium was the one who ended up catching the ball. The whole crowd cheered for this guy. He kind of walked out a few steps and held the ball out. It was like the highlight of this guy's life as a Nebraska football brethren. And so in that sense, at least, I was glad that he caught it and not me, because it definitely meant more to him. But that was kind of my first experience being on the field, meeting my co-host. Obviously, you've got the score up there. I don't remember a whole lot from the game. You guys probably remember a lot more than I do. But
Oh, do we ever?
it was my first time at Nebraska for a game, and it was a great experience. And I'll probably remember that till the day I die. So
Oh
The
my
kicker
God.
was Justin Tucker, by the way.
Justin Tucker.
Yeah,
Okay.
so that would have been a big time one for you.
Yeah.
It
So
could have been your moment.
So yeah, long story short, I mean, that was 2010. We're obviously many years later. The Solid Verbal continues to churn. We're just starting to get ready for the college football season now. It's getting a little bit bigger in the window, as I like to say, and we're gearing up for what I think is going to be a pretty awesome season.
Oh man. So after that game had ended, I like to think now that I've listened to probably over 100 of your pods, probably numbering in the several hundreds. I think I could have been a part of it if I just like had my head up, like I think I could have been your third guy, because I was on the field that day.
Yeah.
What was crazy was after the game, I'd never stuck around that long, but we lost and I was moping and miserable because we were top 5 at the
Yeah.
time.
Yeah.
And we got upset by an unranked Texas, and just moping around. And then they just all the players cleared out, and then they had opened the gates and stuff, and we just got to walk around on the field afterward. I was like, this is where the sad people go, right?
Yeah.
But anyway, so you guys were working at Sports Illustrated, kind of freelancing as well beforehand. When did you, I guess, realize because right now, I mean, you look at you now, you've got the Patreon going where you have, monthly subscribers, you have the Instagram, Facebook, the podcast obviously is huge. When did you realize, hey, I want to do this. Hey, you want to do this. We're going to make the jump and do this full time.
Well, it took a while, frankly, to get to this point. I mean, we had a pretty big break in 2010 or 2011, I forget the exact year, when Bill Simmons and at the time his Grantland.com website were launching a podcast network of sorts. And so they kind of put together a curated list of podcasts that they liked and put them in front of all of their followers. And that was a big deal for us. We brought a lot of new people aboard just in the 1 year that we were kind of affiliated with Grantland. And it just sort of built from there. We've been doing this long enough, and one of the things I think we learned along the way is that we had different indicators that we could look at to figure out, all right, there's a lot of interest in the state of Texas in college football. We should bring more Texas guests on to talk college football. And we would go state to state doing that and trying to build ourselves up as kind of a national voice in the college football realm. And you multiply that out over, a decade plus at this point, and we've built our following very, very organically over the course of a long time. It wasn't until fairly recently that it became more of a real thing that we could kind of focus on this as a full-time thing. I worked a day job up until 2021, a pretty demanding day job that Dan forever had sort of cheerleaded me to quit so that we could focus a little bit more on this. But it really wasn't until we kind of got ourselves sorted out on the business end, which is neither of our strong suits, to be honest. it wasn't until then that it kind of became possible, and we built a little bit of a team around us that could help us do that. So it's been a slow build, to say the
Yeah.
least. And in earnest, it wasn't until like the latter half of 2020 when, obviously there's this horrible pandemic going on, but podcasting is also having a moment because everyone's at home and no one, people are just like starved for connections in any way they can get them.
What do I do? I'm just going to start a podcast. I don't know.
Yeah. I mean, everybody started a podcast in 2020.
That's right.
There was like an explosion of college football shows in 2020, I think, as a result of just everybody was at home and needed something to do. But that I think was more the moment for us when we kind of put two and two together, like, all right, let's go for this. The real defining moment for me was we did an interview with Matthew McConaughey. I want to say in the fall of either 2019 or 2020.
Wow.
And it was at that point where I came downstairs from the studio, sat down at the kitchen table with my wife, shared more than a few drinks for like a Wednesday night because I was just so amped up after this interview. And that was, I think, the moment when I kind of gave myself permission to at least explore the possibility that I could jump into this. So that was a couple years ago now, and I'm very privileged to kind of have this now as my day job. But yeah, it's been a long road with pretty humble beginnings, to say the least.
What can I ask? What was your day job? Were you writing, or were you doing something totally different?
I was in charge of like the digital media operation for a Fortune 500 company.
Oh, wow. So totally different than college football. I love it.
Totally different from college football. It was weird because everybody there knew that I was doing this. And so I had to try my best to not cross the streams and make that weird. I wanted to show respect to my employer and not say anything that would get me in trouble. But I came to a real point in 2020 when the job was amped up in terms of responsibility, and the podcast was obviously continuing to grow in a really meaningful way. And I had to pick one. And so
did you have like a dramatic moment with your boss?
It wasn't a dramatic moment. I mean,
it's either us or the podcast.
No, it was funny because I was like crazy emotional about it. It was the only place I'd ever worked. I got hired right out of school, and I've said to like everybody who would listen that it was like breaking up with my family. It was really hard to do, but I knew it was the right thing to do. And I think the show's better for it, and I know I'm happier for it as well. So thankfully it all worked out.
It's awesome, man. Well, we love hearing this type of stuff because this is Andrew and I's dream. Well, at least it's my dream. Andrew's a doctor during the day, so I don't know if like doctors turn into full-time podcasters, but that's what I want to do. So I love it. I just like
my first love.
Yeah, anytime you get asked the question of like, if you could just do your dream job and do whatever you want all day, be like, I would just talk Nebraska football like 100 to 200 hours a week. That's probably it.
All the time.
Yeah, I'm very lucky that I get to do this. So and be on with luminaries such as yourselves. So thank you again.
So good.
One of my favorite bits that you guys get into, well, I guess I'll just broaden that. Like, I think one of the things that you guys have become best at, just listening to how the show has evolved over the years, is number one, you have some recurrent bits, and then number two, you've got a way that you kind of connect with each fan base, and kind of the ways that to kind of it's not just like here's some surface level stats. It's a little bit more of like a deeper dive into the fanhood and what makes each fan base who they are. But one of the best bits you have is how to talk to your kids about Iowa winning. For a Nebraska fan, like it's every time you guys say it, like, okay, we got to sit the kids down. Kirk Ferentz is at it again.
Yeah.
And that just, I think that just ends up locking me in. But what do you, how do you guys see yourselves as like continuing to build and going from here? Like, how are you going to keep broadening the scope?
Well, that's kind of the question for every offseason, right? I mean, we've got some stuff we're working on now, and we always have more ideas than we could actually execute on, but that's a good thing. My co-host, Dan, is kind of like a creative genius, and I've said for a long time, the creative engine behind what we do. So we always have a million ideas. We kind of whittle them down into the ones that we think are most doable, and we go at it from there in the offseason to see what's available. So we'll see what this season brings, but just in general, I mean, we kind of see ourselves occupying this lane of being college football fans who are optimistic, are not blind to the changes in the sport, the cynicism that goes along with that. I think we try to give voice to that as best we can. We're not just pumping sunshine out here, but I think we have learned along the way that people appreciate optimism. People want you to say nice things about their team, and for it not to be a dunk contest. We're not above that. Obviously, we do that too, but we try to occupy this lane that is somewhere between being optimistic and being factual, while at the same time putting our own spin on things. So it's easier said than done, as you guys know. I mean, it's kind of tough to establish your own voice in a crowded space like ours, but we've had the benefit of doing this for a long time, and I think we're pretty in touch with our fan base. We know what they appreciate. Our fan base has always been really good to us in terms of giving us suggestions and feedback and helping power the show. So if anything is going to help this continue to grow in the way that it has, it's going to be our verballers, the people that listen to all the shows, and the people that give us, great feedback along the way and tell us where we should go next.
The other bit, or what segment that you guys do weekly, the window of opportunity, I find brilliant, and I gauge, maybe this is like the segue into the Nebraska football talk, but I truly gauge our relevance because I find you guys very like unbiased and like honest about it, of like where you put us in your window of opportunity each week. And I always call Andrew afterwards, because usually around September, you're like, we gotta watch Nebraska, Colorado. Like you never know. Maybe Frost is going to turn around. Here comes Pelini. Here comes, like, you have us ranked. And then like by October, we're either like not in any windows, or we're like in the bathroom break, or you just like skip over it altogether. I always call Andrew, like, Andrew, they skipped us again. It's over. Season's off the rails. We're not in the window of opportunity.
Yeah, we didn't even get mentioned.
We're not even in it.
We came to an interesting crossroads last season because we started doing recap episodes late on Saturday nights. It's just Dan and I doing this. I mean, we have some folks that help with other aspects of kind of like the Solid Verbal as a whole, but for the most part, it's Dan and I collecting all the information and putting the show in order and doing the editing and the filming and all. Like, it's pretty much a two-man operation, with the exception of some folks who help out kind of on the periphery. And so it's like we had to make a choice, at least with respect to that recap show, with how are we going to cover this whole damn sport now that we have less time than ever before to prep. And we also need to do so in a way that's like staying true to who we are and to all the reasons that people like to listen to us. And so this is a long way of saying that we don't mean to leave anybody out, whether it's on a preview episode or a recap episode. But
you don't have to sugarcoat it. Okay.
No, but we have such a finite amount of like time that we're able to like dissect all this information.
We can only talk about the top 40 teams in the country.
Yeah, we know where we stand. Okay.
You said it, not me. I did not say that. I don't want to be on record saying that, but maybe we could segue into Nebraska by saying that I don't think that will be the case this season, at least not for the early part of this season, because I think Nebraska's crazy interesting for a whole variety of reasons.
Okay. Dave, you want to get into Nebraska, or you want to go broad first?
Do you want to go broad and then in?
Yeah, we'll go broad and then in. So one of the big questions that I have, just based on the show and everything here, we'll get into some fan bases, because one of the other great segments of your show, and we're going to get into a segment that I call Cheer Tears. One of the great segments is the reverbs. When you guys listen, for those who have not listened, this is where they basically take voicemails and mash them up, and they're from across the country, all these different fan bases. And there's a show called like Big Red Overreaction. It's basically that, which is where people call in, leave voicemails, and they overreact, or they do it on air. And they just get it all out, and everyone airs their laundry. Some of them are celebratory, some of them are negative, etc. But you guys probably listen to hundreds and hundreds of these in order to create a couple-minute segment. And you got to filter through some things and sift them out a little bit. And so here's the game that we're going to play. It's basically going to be you ranking the fan bases into 4 categories. Number 1 is pretty indifferent. Number 2 is surprisingly they do care. That's just fan bases that, they surprisingly have a lot of passion. 3, let's do rational, level-headed, and just great people. And then 4 is completely psychotic. And so
That's
just
most of them. That's
just-
most of them, Andrew.
off of the cuff, is there a fan base that is out there that just strikes you when I say that? Okay, pretty indifferent, and then we'll get into some Big Ten teams, but pretty indifferent. Who strikes you as that?
Indifferent. I mean, of course there are exceptions to this. I could only speak to my own personal experience dealing with some fan bases, but I think you're talking about mid to bottom tier power conference teams, like
Indiana. Is that where we're going?
Illinois is the
sure.
first one that came to mind. Like, there aren't a whole lot of rabid Wake Forest fans.
Yes, thank you.
That I've had the privilege of speaking with. Duke, a lot of ACC teams that sort of
totally
that sort of rise to that level.
Love it. How about surprisingly they do care? Like, you're just like, wow, this school. Really?
Yeah, Syracuse. We've had very passionate Syracuse fans that have listened to us and written in over the years.
That's a good one. I would have never actually.
Yeah, me neither. So I think Syracuse is probably the one that comes to mind first. We had some passionate Duke fans write in over the last couple years.
They've weathered the storm.
Weathered the storm, or felt like they were part of a moment with Mike Elko. We've had some Dukies write in along the way. Gosh, I'm trying to think who else in the Big Ten. Purdue.
Mm-hmm.
Purdue's a school that does have a bit of a winning tradition, and most recently with Jeff Brom when he was there, the spoiler maker thing. Obviously, they played a pretty big role in the national conversation, just scaring the crap out of teams, if nothing more. And we have a lot of Purdue fans that are very vocal, that write in and give us a steady amount. Minnesota is another one. Minnesota kind of caught me off guard, if I'm being honest with you.
Yeah.
Me too. They're all over our mentions. We never know why.
Minnesota is a bit in the Michigan camp from this standpoint. Anything that you say that is remotely true but unflattering, you will hear about it.
Yes.
You will hear about it. And that caught me off guard.
Yes.
That really caught me off guard.
Okay, I like that.
I have to think more about others. There are definitely others
that's a good tier.
Sneak up on you.
That's a good tier. This is just helping me ground for the ones that we name. And then, all right, how about rational, level-headed, just like solid, salt of the earth folks? Other than Nebraska, you can start there. Who's next?
Other than Nebraska, TCU.
Okay, I like it.
That may be a mischaracterization, but I
don't see them as having too many enemies.
I can say with certainty that 2 years ago, when TCU was in the national championship, the level-headed feedback that we got from people was very refreshing.
Yeah.
And it definitely took on a tone of, we're very happy to be here. We don't think we're going to win.
Yeah.
But we're very happy to be here. This is awesome. Which I thought was healthy. And to kind of build on that, there didn't seem to be expectations that it was going to be an annual thing for them to get back to that title game, which is where I think a lot of fan bases kind of go down the drain.
Yeah.
It seemed as though the expectations were relatively in check.
Yeah.
That's good. Got to be nice to just have a nice, appreciative group.
Yeah. So I think TCU is one. Level-headed. West Virginia people?
Really?
They're very passionate. This is not my way of saying they're not passionate. They're very passionate.
No, yeah.
But I found that the feedback that I get often from West Virginia folks are You know, it's
Yeah.
among some of like the smarter, more like informed.
High IQ fans.
Yeah, like
Yeah.
they know their team really well, but they're not blind to what's going on elsewhere around college
Like it.
football.
How about I mean, I'm just looking forward to this answer, but who when I say the words completely psychotic,
Yeah. I mean,
who
kind of everybody else.
who jumps out? Everyone,
the Russ.
kind of everybody else.
the field.
I
Are there
have like one team a year where I will say something about a team, and then the fan bases for that team will just be on me all year. And last year it was Michigan.
Oh,
And,
wow.
And look, I picked Michigan to win the title at the start of the year.
Yeah.
Then they made it to the playoff against Alabama.
That's not enough.
And I buckled. And I said, well, I'm going to pick Alabama here. I'm not going to go against Nick Saban with all this time to prepare. The game was close.
Yeah.
Michigan won by what, 3 in overtime, whatever it ended up. I forget what the score was, but like the Alabama pick wasn't on its face that bad of a pick. They could have won the game if a few things go in their favor.
Yeah.
But Michigan fans, like, again, to the point I made earlier, anything remotely true but unflattering, it was you never stopped hearing about it.
Had your head on a pike afterward.
Yeah. I had the same thing happen to me a couple years back with Florida State. I feel like I've made amends with the Florida State fan base.
That's a tough fan base. Yeah.
But Florida State definitely has a segment that is just you cannot reason with them. Ohio State, pretty much any of these bigger tier major school blue blood programs, like you're gonna have a pretty big segment of that base that is very vocal, and it doesn't matter how much logic you use, it's never gonna get through.
Love it. All right, Dave, go ahead. All right, Nebraska, where would you put us between psychotic and rational, level-headed? Those are the only two choices.
I think more level-headed, if I'm being honest. And this has kind of surprised me because what I found about Nebraska over the last, let's say, since Frost got there, 4 or 5 years, whatever it's been, what I found is, despite the fact that there were really high expectations when Frost got there, it seems as though, at least the people that I have had the good fortune of interacting with, it seems as though folks are pretty grounded in terms of expectations. I have spoken to any odd number of Nebraska fans over the last 2-3 seasons, and I have been pleasantly surprised at the number of people who have not been unrealistic in their expectations. Like we did a show a couple weeks ago with Mitch Sherman, who, like mutual friend of our pods. And some of the feedback we got from Nebraska folks was like, hey, we don't think we're going to win 10 games. Obviously we want to. Yeah. We don't think we're going to win 10 games. We kind of just want to make a bowl. We wanted to feel like something is building. That's more important than the win-loss record at the end of the season. And I just found that really refreshing. Obviously, when things were going south with Frost, there were different segments within the fan base. But I just felt even then, when emotions were running high, most of the feedback, at least that we got, and I'm sure you get more of it being part of the Nebraska community, I thought it was pretty level-headed.
Yeah.
And not psychotic. It was very like down to earth and in touch with reality.
Appreciate that.
I think it's loyal to a fault, as I explore. We sell out every game, regardless of if we're making a bowl or if we're 5-7 or 4-8 or whatever it is. But I do think there is, and you kind of touched on it with Mitch in your podcast, how there's scar tissue, I think is what he called it. How it's sort of been broken down in a lot of ways, where like we're so dominant, not just in the 90s, but 70s and 80s and 90s, all the way through to early 2000s. But then, when you break a fan base down to like not making a bowl for 7 straight seasons, you kind of come up and everyone's like, Uncle, like, all right, hey, hang on, please. Let's just get to a bowl. We'll build up to 8 games. Yeah. We'll build up to 10. Like, we'll get back to like, everybody hammered Pelini. And now everyone's kind of sitting here like 10-2 sounds pretty good.
It's like, this is like after you change your tire to like the spare. And then you're like on a highway and you're like, I kind of just want to make it at this point.
Yeah, right.
That's That's where we're at, but we're still true.
True fan,
Uh,
baby.
All right, let's do some rapid fires here, Dave. Ohio State, where are you throwing them?
I mean, they're among the most irrational. It's an incredibly rabid fan base, and I would throw them more in like the Florida State camp,
Yeah,
in my experience, than some of the others that I mentioned before. It's a very big fan base. It's a very, very passionate fan base,
they
and
are.
I think things have been amped up to 1,000,000 now that they've lost to Michigan 3 straight years.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
So, like, we're starting to have weird conversations out there in the college football ether on our show with respect to, hey, what happens if Ryan Day loses again to Michigan?
He's 11. He's an 11-1 every season now. It's insane.
I know it.
We did a podcast episode. We did two mailbag episodes this
Just
week.
today. Didn't you say he's 39-3? Did I hear that right?
Something like that. It's an incredibly successful record.
In the regular season, he's like 39-3. He's lost like 3 games. They're all them to Michigan.
Without fail, like, we have heard from, I don't know, let's say a dozen, maybe, Ohio State fans that have written in and like contested our comments that you can't fire Ryan Day. And I'm like, well, what if he goes like 11-1 and they're going to go to the playoff the next week? They're like,
Yeah.
Fire him on the field. Like, fire him on the field. Like, you got to beat Michigan.
Gone.
So I appreciate that level of passion.
Yeah. Okay.
And I'm not here to kind of demean anybody. I mean, I know how it is to be a big fan of a team. So keep on being you. But
I mean, now that they're spending $20 million or whatever that number is going to end up being, like, I feel like it is a do or die in some instance of, like, if you can't win with a $20 million roster.
I mean, but they're not going to fire him, I think is the point. He'd leave, he'd go somewhere else. I don't think that it would ever be a situation where they're like, sorry, Ryan, because who are you going to get to replace him? That's always the next question. And I don't know, who better you're going to find. It's obviously a great job. It'd be a very difficult,
that's
very
unthinkable.
difficult position to fill with kind of like the guy you're looking for. But,
Truly unthinkable.
Yeah,
go to the playoff every.
Dan, my co-host, often says that college football is an infection, and I think Ohio State, among others, is like a pretty good example of why. Yeah.
All right. How about Iowa? As you can see, these lovely fans on your screen.
Iowa,
just good, humble folks flipping off everyone.
Yeah, Iowa fans are, I think, split between rational and level-headed, and also people that I would just describe as being just like straight up stubborn. And what comes to mind, and I get that this might be a bit of a clunky comparison. I'm not hearkening back to the bad stuff, but just like as Penn State grad, after Joe Paterno was gone, after they forced him out, rightfully so, after all that, scandal bit, there were still and there still are people within the fan base that have never really moved past the Joe Paterno era.
Sure.
And they kind of long for that style of Penn State football and those days of Penn State football. And it doesn't matter what happens under James Franklin. Like, he's always sort of the enemy, and you're not going to stick for him because Penn State football is different now. And I see some of the same points of overlap with respect to feedback that we get talking about Kirk Ferentz, because Kirk Ferentz is obviously a bit of a punching bag, right? If only because of what's going on with offense, but a good coach. He's been there a long time, won a lot of games, sometimes against all odds. I don't think we're going to question whether or not Kirk Ferentz is a good coach, but he's definitely not a great offensive coach.
Correct.
And because of that, he's been very much in the news. We've brought it up on our show countless times, and it never ceases to amaze me the number of people who comment on YouTube videos or send in emails or comment on social media about, like, you guys aren't giving Kirk the respect he deserves.
I think we are.
I mean,
I think you're doing
there
enough.
Since '99. He's won a lot of games. I think since '99, he's won a lot of games, and it's like, at some point you got to field an offense in this new era of college football. Like, you got to track with me here, guys.
Clearly
you understand this is a problem, but
it is
they just refuse to see it sometimes. Yeah, it's wild.
decades of the same football. All right.
Well, second, but before we do that, I was actually Ty. I was at that game, the Penn State Nebraska game, right after Joe Paterno.
Oh, so was I.
I mean,
Yeah.
so you were that. That was the weirdest game
like-
day experience I've ever been to in my life.
It's like somber.
As a student at Penn State, as somebody who has been to countless games at Penn State, I live in the state of Pennsylvania. Like all of these points of connection, I've got a fair amount of knowledge for what game day is like at Penn State.
Yeah.
I've never seen anything like that in my life. That was the weirdest, most uncomfortable.
Yeah.
Everybody was in the crowd and no one really knew what to do.
Yeah.
It was
I will
strange.
say I was very surprised. A lot of folks were like, be careful there. Like, you don't know what's going to happen. Like, as a Nebraska fan visiting, the fans were extremely nice to us. Extremely nice.
Yeah.
I think probably because they didn't like know what to do. And we had heard it's very hostile there and it's like a crazy environment, all this stuff. And it was very like odd. It was very like Penn State fans were like, hey, welcome. Thank you so much for coming. Like, I was like, oh, okay. Thank you. And then the whole vibe was very weird. Remember they prayed before the game.
Yeah, it was so weird.
They prayed before the game and then they're like, I think we should play a football game.
Yeah.
And then they're kind of cheering and not really cheering. It's very bizarre.
It was truly one of the most weird things that I've experienced in person. I mean, just in covering this sport all this time now, very few things I could compare it to. It was just like everybody was there to watch a game, but like nobody really wanted to be there. It was strange.
Very bizarre.
It's like we had tickets, we had to use them, but we don't know if we're supposed to cheer, if that's okay, what's going on. So it was
a huge game. Like it was in the Big Ten standings and stuff at the time. And like for the players, they were probably like, this is bizarre. All right, next up we got
we got to get to Husker talk. Let's get through these guys.
Yeah. All right, hit me with Minnesota.
Well,
We'll
Minnesota. Yeah, I think
oh yeah, we covered them.
We covered Minnesota. What's this other one? UCLA? Let's see, UCLA.
Yes.
Kind of indifferent.
Yeah.
Yep.
Kind of indifferent. There are exceptions. There are exceptions on my Patreon at forballers.com.
Sure.
But I would say generally.
I was wondering the vibe on UCLA just with them joining, and it seems like of the four, I'm like, man, you just don't hear much about UCLA fans.
I would say generally indifferent if I had to bucket them in any of those categories.
Yeah, and then Michigan, you throwing in up the
yeah, they're
in the Ohio State bank.
Ohio State, yeah,
fair enough.
Yeah.
Wait, one more thing. This is our segue.
Yes, it is.
I don't know if you checked your stats, but
yeah,
this is our segue into Husker football. 14,000 views compared to all of your others that are like right around 1,000, maybe 2,000, 3,000.
That one really popped.
That one popped. Husker fans, nuts. It's also a great episode, so anybody who's listening, you should check this episode out. Really good episode. But Andrew, let's segue into Husker football. We got over 1,000 folks here live. It's June 13th. It's a random Thursday night, and we have 1,000 fans that are sitting here waiting to hear what Ty wants to say about Nebraska football.
Let's go.
Just rip the Band-Aid off. Just tell us, what do we think we're back.
What does back mean to you?
Oh, here it comes.
What does that mean to you?
This isn't a therapy session, Ty.
What does back mean to you?
Okay,
Tell me what it means to you, and I'll tell you if it means the same for me.
Back for me is that I can't even really explain it, but that we have a chance to be in the conversation, in that top 25 conversation every week, playing competitive football into November. And that this is suddenly the deepest team that we've had in years. And that there's, instead of kind of like, well, if this goes right, and if this goes right, and if this goes right, and if this goes right, it's kind of I'm pretty sure this should go right. Like we have more of a proven defense, a top 10 defense returning. We have just a couple too many, I think, question marks to maybe have everybody on offense for everyone to kind of say, oh, this team is legit. But I think it's nice to have some sort of stability coming back with a defense that can probably pick the offense up when it's down, and the best depth that we've had in quite a while too. That to me is if it's not back, it's one step closer.
Right. So to to the talking point from earlier, then, do you have an expectation in terms of wins and losses, or is it more of a vibe?
Yeah, I mean, the number's somewhere around 12.
12? Okay, that's fair.
I would say to get you a real number. I mean, and keep going back to what Mitch said. If like winning the games you're supposed to win, winning the games you're supposed to win gets us to 8 wins. And you look at our schedule, like
It's
win the
workable.
games, you're supposed to win. Which every time we pull up the schedule every year, you're just like, yeah, there's 8 wins there, and then there's 4.
Yeah.
So I would say that's where it's like you do the things you're supposed to do, you win the games you're supposed to win, and then you compete, which we have been. We compete very well against the top teams. We just never beat them. That to me is, let's anchor on 8 and give me a perspective on 8.
Well, I mean, they could start 6-0 with the way that the schedule is set up.
Talk to me.
The first 6 weeks of the schedule, I'm looking at it now. UTEP, Colorado, Northern Iowa, Illinois, Purdue, and Rutgers. They could win all those games. They've got enough depth to win all those games. I mean, Colorado maybe is the great X factor. I know that's a huge rivalry. Thankfully, it's in Lincoln.
Yep.
So that'll be obviously fun. But, you start out the season, I think, in a really favorable way, presumably because you're going to have a freshman quarterback. And there are changes elsewhere on offense. I'm not going to misrepresent myself, guys, and act as if I've done like the full Nebraska deep dive. I know the 2 deep and all that stuff. I mean, I can speak to it from a higher level, I'm sure, than you and or I prefer to speak to it from a higher level, at least at this point in June, than maybe you guys and many of the folks that are listening at home. But we've done a fair amount of research already. We've talked to guys like Mitch, and we've been examining these schedules now, especially within the context of an expanded Big Ten. And so I just think it really sets up well for Nebraska. Nebraska is one of those teams to me that, as I said at the top, is one of the more interesting programs in college football right now. And it stems from the fact that they do have some modicum of stability now.
Yeah.
Stability in this day and age in college football is kind of like the currency. That is the thing that everybody wants. And obviously we've got things like the portal and NIL and conference realignment and expanded playoff, all these big structural changes. If you have stability within your program, that's the most important thing. And that is what Matt Rule has been very good at in the college ranks. I was actually quite impressed with what Nebraska did last season. They were beat up on offense. There was a lot that went wrong on offense. We don't need to do that post-mortem. But defensively, they were a really solid unit. They bring a lot back this year. And Matt Rule has gone out there. He's added depth. He has tried to raise the floor in terms of talent for this roster. Obviously, bringing in Dylan Raiola has brought a ton of hype as well. But it just seems as if it will be a slow build under Rule, the way it was a slow build at Temple, the way it was a slow build at Baylor. Yep. So I don't know if this is the quote unquote year like your hat says, but I think we will see progressively and gradually over the course of the next couple seasons, for as long as Rule is there, he will turn this program into one that is stable. He will turn this program into one that is focused more on development and less on getting like quick wins, that type of thing. I mean, I think his programs have tended to be built in a really solid way from the ground up. And so that is what I look at most with respect to expectations. They were so beat up a year ago, it really tested their depth. This year, depth should be better. If they're hurt again, I don't think it'll be quite as catastrophic on offense. If they can manage the early part of the schedule, I mean, the back half of the schedule is there. I mean, there are plenty of teams in the back half of the schedule. Indiana's got a new coach, new quarterback. UCLA's also got a new coach.
Yep.
Who knows what to expect from USC this year? The game's on the road, but USC's got some of their own issues. Even schools like Wisconsin, who knows what to expect from Wisconsin with a new starting quarterback, Tyler Van Dyke. So I just feel like I tend to look at these schedules often and point out the teams that have question marks. And there are plenty of teams in the schedule that have far more questions than Nebraska does. And I think that's a pretty good place to be.
Yeah. The thing that, just engaging, like It's funny. I have a friend that is a he's a big college football fan, but he's not explicitly a Nebraska fan, and he kind of has this just neutral stance. And I basically said, oh well, we were going through the schedule last year, and I was like, oh well, we should beat them, and I think we should beat them, and then he just like paused me once, and he was just like, why? And then I had to like think a lot, and I was like, I don't really know why we we should beat them, but I think this year the thing that I guess um, is that now there's some tangible evidence. I guess
Yeah.
I think there's in these last few seasons, even though like I could talk myself into 7-5 and whatever, it was a little bit more of like hypotheticals. And there's still hypotheticals, of course, but like this year, I guess, okay, we needed receivers. We
Right.
went to town in the portal, and we redshirted several players last year that could have been, starters.
Yep.
And so you're returning a bunch of depth at receiver now. Okay, great, awesome. We needed O-line depth. We got 2 guys back that are going to be 5th and 6th year guys.
Yep.
They could have been gone. There's just a lot of these question marks that feel like this is a good year to be old in the new Big Ten.
Yep.
It's a good year to have this returning experience that just to me feels like I'm not able to I don't have as many question marks.
Well, and one thing I try to do when I go through and study for our previews that we usually do at some point in like early to mid July, I try to check my own source of optimism for some of these teams. And I have often fallen into the trap where I look at a schedule and I say, wow, that schedule's really good. I really like that schedule.
Yeah.
And based on the schedule alone, I am projecting kind of optimism. I've done that more times than I could count with schools like Ole Miss or
Yep.
TCU not so much in like the current iteration of the SEC.
Yeah, you just find that you're picking names. You're like, oh, Ole Miss versus them.
You're looking at a schedule. You're looking at a schedule and you're saying, oh, that road, I would take that road if I were playing in that conference. That seems like that would be very manageable. And I've tried to stop doing that as much based solely on a schedule because obviously there are 1,000 other factors that play into it. But what I think is cool for Nebraska this year, not only does the schedule look pretty favorable to me relative to some of their peers and throughout college football, but I do know that Matt Rule's got a track record. And his track record has been like not necessarily year 1, but by the time you get to year 3 under Matt Rule, usually it's a system. He's developing talent. He's built from the lines out. He's got good depth. Players want to go there because they know he can turn them into something. And, I think, I hope anyway, year 2 now under Rule will kind of give us some glimpses of that against what appears to be a pretty favorable schedule. Now, the X factor is Dylan Raiola, in my view. And maybe it's cliche to say it at this point. I'm sure you guys have probably talked until you're blue in the face about him. But if he goes out there and is half as good as the hype around him, then eight wins feels like it's much more attainable. You're going to have to expect some true freshman mistakes. I think that goes with the territory. I don't care how good he is, but
you don't know how fast this hype train can go.
Oh, I'm sure. I've been around the block with this for a long time, and I know how the hype train goes. But what I like again about the schedule is it gives him an opportunity to settle in with the team, with the offense before they get to some of the heavy hitters on the schedule. And if he can work out some of the kinks before then, they'll be better for it.
There's a couple components jumping on there that a big component of last year was like, man, if we just had a competent basic quarterback, we would have won 8 games last year. And they're like, oh, well, now we have the number 1 quarterback in the country. And we've never even had a 5-star quarterback in Nebraska. This is totally new territory for us. But what we get caught up in all the time as I look at the schedule is it does look great. And it looks great every time I look at it. I'm like, oh, Illinois, duh. Purdue, win, duh. Colorado, win. Illinois beat us 3 of the last 4. Purdue has beaten us like 3 of the last 4 years. We lost to Colorado 3 straight times. Like I just chalk those up as wins because I'm like, we should beat Illinois. We should beat Illinois. We should beat Illinois. That's terrible. I'm like, oh, we stink. So I think we get caught up in that of like, oh, actually, that's the track record your friends probably
just using your name. Yeah.
Yeah, you're just like, well, we should just win. But what not to open the gasket, but it's just as our first tough one. Colorado, what do you think of Colorado, Ty? Like, I mean, we're deep in it. and
Yeah.
their fans are insane, and it's all over like everywhere. But like I can't quite figure out like when they beat the heck out of us last year, and I was like, man, maybe he's figured it out. And then they lost every game since. But now we're back to talking about Colorado in the playoff, which is bananas to me. Because I'm like, did nobody watch them lose every game last year? So I don't know what to make of it.
Their fans aren't even insane. They're just like, it's like they were like an unplugged computer for like 8 years, and then like someone plugged them back in, and they're like trying to get all caught up with. They're glitching. They're just like glitching nonstop, and they're like, what? We're a national title contender.
One of the more interesting episodes that we've done, and we'll probably try to do it at some point in the next month and a half or so. But a guy by the name of Dan Carlin, who runs Hardcore History.
Oh, I love it. Yeah.
Very, very popular podcast. Is like a huge Colorado fan. And we've had him on each of the last 2 years talking about Colorado football. Last year was really interesting because it was this whole Dion thing, and he's very much a traditionalist and misses West Coast football and Pac-12 and kind of laments the state of affairs in college football, how things have turned into a big business. But understanding a little bit more about the Colorado fan experience has been, I think, somewhat enlightening for me, for Dan. And I think people like Dan have been somewhat crowded out, at least of the online sphere, by a lot of bandwagon fans who are just really excited to root for Dion, really excited that he's trying something new. And frankly, plenty of people who just kind of transfixed by the story. I mean, I was transfixed by the story last year.
Yeah, you can't take your eyes off it. It's true.
You couldn't. I mean, you couldn't look away.
Absolutely true. Yeah.
So I think that was part of the plan despite the fact that there's plenty of criticism for how he's building a roster and how he's not doing high school recruiting.
I don't think he is building a roster. I think he's just.
Well, he's building a roster, just not the conventional way.
Scrapping for
he's
parts.
doing it almost entirely through the transfer portal, which has not been done before, and not nearly to this level.
It is unbelievable.
And so he's trying something new. And like from my perspective, okay, that's interesting. It didn't work last year. Could it work this year? Maybe they get better at it.
It could.
I don't know but so that part I think makes it really difficult for me to fully gauge where Colorado is. I think they'll be better. What I worry about though is it's going to end up being the Shedeur Sanders show on offense, and it's going to be entirely on him to do what they did last year, like scramble around, throw the ball deep, try to do whatever they can to negate an offensive line that didn't block at all a year ago. They didn't play defense at all last season. I haven't seen a whole lot of proof that they have fixed some of those glaring weaknesses. Like compare and contrast what Nebraska did in the offseason with what Colorado did in the offseason. It's like night and day. Nebraska was very targeted. Nebraska went out after depth. Nebraska seems to have something of a plan behind what they're doing. That's not to say Colorado doesn't. It just feels so different and so scattershot that it makes it really hard to project. So I don't really know what to make of them. I am definitely not seeing Colorado this season through the most optimistic lens. I just don't see enough proof that they've gotten a whole lot better in the offseason. And I am doing my best to try and listen to more fans like Dan, who I mentioned earlier.
Yeah.
And less of the folks who live in our YouTube comments or our email inbox who maybe are just passing through and are
you and I will be
unrealistically optimistic about Colorado football. I mean, like we had so many people last year talking Colorado playoff, and Dion has taken this sport by storm, and no one's ever seen anything like it. And they're right. He did take it by storm. We've never seen anything like it. They still didn't block or play defense. So,
we've never seen that either.
Yeah.
Or we've never seen it work. We've seen it. We've never seen it work.
The dichotomy between, because they hired Rule and Dion in the same cycle. And there's a lot of folks who were like, not a lot of folks in Nebraska. I don't think anybody really in Nebraska wanted Dion, but it was such a dichotomy.
Yeah.
And then the fact that he, rolled up and just beat the heck out of us, we were like, wait a second. This whole, the stability, which now in hindsight, I would much prefer Rule. I think he's building something to all your points, but it is weird where you're like, well, they just beat the heck out of us with just a
Yeah.
bunch of random transfer portal kids. Like,
Met these guys 2 weeks ago.
yeah, I'm like, why don't we do that? This is crazy. You know, I fell into it because it was head to head. And if he does it again, I'm gonna be like, okay, like, what
Yeah.
are we doing? Because this guy's just pulling kids off the street and beating us again.
I appreciate the fact that he's trying something radically different.
Sure.
I appreciate that. That is my jam. Okay. I am cool with that. And what we learn as a result of this, I think, will be very interesting. And it will certainly impact college football in some way moving forward. I also don't think we know enough yet about the Dion plan to know that it's going to be a failure or a success. I think we need more data before we got one season a year ago.
Yeah.
Let's see what happens after Shador goes pro. After
Yeah.
Travis Hunter goes pro, let's see what that looks like then.
Yeah.
Is Dion going to give a rip about Colorado football after his son graduates? Like, I don't know. I have no idea. So there are so many unknowns with this program that,
Right.
you know, I tend to get long-winded about this. I apologize.
No, it's all good.
I just don't know how to project them. I have no idea
crazy.
how to project Colorado this year.
Yeah.
All right, Andrew, I want to be respectful of Ty's time. Hit your last two, because these are two last good questions, number 10 and 11 there.
Yeah. Well, so kind of the big thing, I guess, for me is just the new Big Ten, the new order, everything that's going on, everything we're heading into in the future. Two-part question. So, number one, is there anything that gives you hesitation about Nebraska? Like, what would be the biggest thing that you would want Nebraska to fix before heading into kind of this new order? And then two, how does this new order affect schools that are positioned like Nebraska versus one that's positioned maybe in the quote unquote lower tier? I know we've been in the lower tier, but let's say like an Indiana or,
Right.
Purdue, like, are they going to just stay there forever? Is this going to become like, talk to me about like, where's Nebraska at? How are we positioned? What would you fix going into the future?
Well, I think the thing I would focus the most on to start would probably be the offensive line. And, I feel like last year when we brought this up on our show, we got some pushback like, oh, the line wasn't that bad. You just don't watch Nebraska football. I've got the numbers in front of me. The numbers are not kind to Nebraska football with respect to their line.
Just start spitting them.
They gave up a lot of pressure. They gave up a lot of sacks. That's not entirely on the line. They also had injuries. They had quarterback issues. Like, I know that it's like a holistic thing, but I think we need to fix the line first and foremost, because they were not very effective at running the football. And so much of the stress came on the quarterback position, which wasn't equipped to handle it last season.
Mm-hmm.
So that starts from the inside out. I would like to see them get better up front. Thankfully, I think Matt Rule is the guy who can help them fix that.
Mm-hmm.
And I think he's already taken steps to try and make that better this season. But it's hard when you're so hurt. It's hard when you're taking over day one at a new place and you have to kind of build from the ground up. So he's proven he can do that. I think the line is probably where I'm focused the most. Obviously, you want skill talent. You want a better wide receiving, or you want a better wide receiving core. You want a better quarterback. All that stuff goes without saying. But I think for me, it starts with the line, and I'm optimistic that Rule can do it. As for what is Nebraska's place in all of this, I think he can win at Nebraska. I think especially with a guy like a Matt Rule, who's won at a bunch of different places and it's got a fairly varied experience when it comes to coaching football, pro and college. Like, the guy, at least in the college ranks, has a pretty good track record. You know what you're getting with him.
Mm-hmm.
And, I'd go so far as to say that a guy like that can win pretty much anywhere. He's already kind of putting his system in place, and I think they're going to be well equipped to kind of go into this new world order of things, and hopefully get some momentum, get some wind at their back. So I think they're fine. Where it does get interesting, though, is when you're talking about schools like, Illinois or Indiana. Not to pick on those guys, but we have this growing gulf in college football. It's always what has given the sport its charm, that David versus Goliath aspect to every Saturday, knowing that a 28-point underdog could on any given Saturday knock off the number 5 team in the country, whoever. that gap between the haves and the have-nots has continued to widen with NIL, with the transfer portal,
Yeah.
et cetera, et cetera. And so I think it puts smaller programs in a real bind. It
Mhm.
puts them in a real bind. It doesn't so much matter to them that the pathway to get into the playoff is wider. In some cases, if you're in like the Big Ten East, if you're Maryland, if you're Michigan State, it doesn't so much matter that the divisions go away and maybe your
Right.
schedule gets a little bit easier. You're always going to be up against this issue with NIL and with
Yeah.
losing your guys to some bigger programs out there. How they deal with that, how college football deals with that 5 years, 10 years down the line, that to me remains a big unknown. We could sit here
Mm.
and guess as to what that's going to mean in the grand scheme of things. I think the writing is on the wall that it is headed to a place that benefits the true blue bloods of the college football
Yeah.
world and the big money institutions. But we don't really know that for sure at this point. It's a lot of assumption. So I think Nebraska's certainly in a better place than
Yeah.
a few of those schools that I mentioned, and especially now with Matt Rule. I'll take a wait and see approach to see how things go elsewhere around college football for some of the smaller programs, smaller power programs.
I love that answer. I think it's as soon as NIL broke, I was like, this is it. This is our chance. Like, there's so few programs out there where Nebraska is the only program in the state.
Yeah.
And we've got a ton of money in the state, and it all goes towards it. You have loyal fans. And, the reason we started this jerky business was like, all right, if we can pool the Husker fans, like all of the collective energy into one thing, this is it. And that's been almost even more frustrating as you're like, wait, we are doing that and it's still not working. So
Yeah.
I hope that turns into a divide. And like, I'm waiting for Illinois to fall apart. I'm waiting for Purdue to fall apart, and they haven't yet. And so I'm like, wait a second, when can we buy our way to the top? And that, it hasn't panned out yet. I think it will.
Well,
But
it could. And here's the other aspect of this. We talked about what Dion is doing at Colorado. And not to say that it's the same model at Nebraska. It would be sacrilegious to compare the two. I get that. But like, what Dion is doing at Colorado is he is trying to fake it until he makes it. He is trying to kick up so much dust. He is trying to become kind of the media darling that makes Colorado a cool place to go and play. And I think he is hoping that transfers want to be part of that high school recruits also want to be part of that. Well, there's a second part to that equation. You actually have to put guys in the NFL. You actually have to win football games.
Yeah.
He hasn't really proven that he can do that at scale yet. Maybe that'll change this year. But I think Nebraska, to their credit, got Dylan Raiola.
Yep.
If Dylan Raiola comes in, and again, I'll say it again, is half as good as the hype around him, that tends to build some momentum in the recruiting game. That tends to help recruit other players to want to come to Nebraska. That tends to make Nebraska more of a story, if only because they're on TV, they're a talking point every Saturday. These things have an interesting way of building and snowballing and eventually, hopefully, hitting critical mass. And so if you're Nebraska, I think the opportunity now in front of them with Dylan Raiola is incredible, right? Do whatever they can to keep him there, because it's a brave new world where he could leave at a moment's notice. I don't think it'll happen. There are connections there. Okay. It's not the same as, some other guys who have left, but I think if they're able to kind of leverage the whole Raiola effect and build that into some positive momentum for the program, that would put them in a really, really strong spot moving forward under Rule.
Yeah. I mean, this is such a huge year for the future for us. 100% agree. My last question, just getting back to, college football and the direction that it's headed, is kind of that 10,000-foot view. I mean, college football has needed a czar. They've needed an emperor for a long time, and you have my vote. So if you're running, but here's the question. The big hitting question, because it's such a broad scope. But like, what are the urgent things that need to be fixed in college football in order to maintain this same level of passion and the same level of interest, 5 to 10 years down the line? Like, what are the things that you're seeing, that you're saying, oh boy, if this happens, this could go down a bad road.
The single most hated thing about this new era of college football, and I mean, I can speak for myself, but I'm mostly speaking on behalf of the people that write into me. The dozens upon dozens upon dozens of emails that we get in a given week. Overwhelmingly, people hate the thing about rivalries going away.
Yep.
Yes.
It is a rivalry-driven sport. It is a
Yeah.
tribal sport. You care first and foremost about your team, and then maybe about what goes on the national scene.
Mhm.
Like if you're kind of like a super fan with your own team, and then you care about national college football as a whole, then you listen to my show. But a lot of people don't, because they only care about their team, and they care about the
Yeah.
rivalries
True.
that go along with that team. Losing some of those, or at least the threat
Mm.
of losing some of those, is,
Mhm.
I think, a very, very urgent concern around college football. I don't know how you fix that. I don't see kind of like a clear pathway to fix that, or to ensure that more won't go away in the future.
Mm.
Losing the Pac-12 was a huge black eye,
Yeah.
for the sport. I mean, there are
I
a
couldn't
lot of
believe that.
people. There are a lot of people who feel really dirty about that.
Yep.
And everybody knows it was about money. They're not even trying to hide it anymore. This
No.
is a big time money decision. Thanks for coming out, right? A great conference down the tubes because the money wasn't good enough, or the Pac-12 out, like kind of overvalued itself, whatever the rationale was for that. The thing that I think people are most afraid of is losing those bits of charm in college football. And so
Yeah.
if I'm czar, if I'm, in any kind of decision making position,
Yeah.
I
Just bring
think
the regionality back.
I think so.
Yeah.
I think trying to find a way to steer into what makes college football special
Yeah.
is something that would need to be at the top of the list. You can't influence everybody's schedule, especially now in the playoff era where it pays to not lose games. Like, it always paid to not lose games, but now it pays to like not lose more than 2. So you're always going to have this conversation now, maybe more than ever, with respect to out of conference scheduling and things like that. Do we still want to play our rival? Does it make sense to play our rival, kind of because they could prevent us from getting to the playoff, et cetera? But I would try to come up with some mechanism by which we could encourage schools to
Yep.
retain those rivalries. I don't know how you do it. That's why I'm not the czar, but that's,
Yeah.
I can tell you
Yeah.
overwhelmingly that's the thing that
Someday.
people hate most about where this has all gone. And
Yeah.
I would
It's
try to
totally
restore as
true.
much as I could.
No, it's 100% true. I mean, it's like people love the weirdness of it, the
Yeah.
territorialism, and like there's teams like Oregon State who are getting screwed. That they, of course they want to win a national championship, but they kind of also know that's probably not in our cards. But I tell you what was a huge deal is playing Oregon
Yep.
and playing Washington.
Yeah.
Playing Washington State, and those people that I see at the grocery store with the other team's hat on, that's a big deal to them.
Yeah.
And that,
And to be fair now, I mean, not all of the rivalries have gone away. There are still
right.
plenty of them that have been kind of, in some cases like Texas and Texas A&M, it's been restored, right? So it's not all bad, but
Yeah.
there is this stigma out there that because this is all so driven by money, and because we've got West Coast teams playing in a conference based in Chicago, like all of this stuff has been thrown
So
in a
crazy.
It's stupid, right? All of this
Stanford
stuff
and the ACC, I was like, I almost vomited when I heard that.
I still can't get it straight. I still
It is
it's
great.
I've compared it on my show to like the Houston Astros switching to the AL or what. Like
Yeah.
there are just these parts of your childhood as a sports fan that you can't deprogram.
It's more like Houston joining the Dominican League or something.
Right. It's just
It's just
yeah, it's wild, man. It's crazy. So I just think that like that fear of the money overtaking the charm
sure.
is something that we would need to address
Yeah.
somehow. I don't know how you do it.
Love it.
I've got one final segment if you've got a few more minutes, Ty.
As much time as you need, guys.
Cool with that, Dave?
Do it.
So speaking of weirdness, this is a good segment or a good segue into this segment. I spent last night looking into, I don't know what sent me down this rabbit hole, but I was like, you know what? I got to get Ty in on this somehow. All of the strangest lyrics and just odd lyrics coming from fight songs and team songs from around the Big Ten. And your job is for me to read this without any musical cues and tell me which school it is. You ready for that?
Okay.
Okay.
Yes,
Here's number one. Some of these are so off the wall. I tell you what, songs in 1910 used to hit a little different. All right. Number one. Old Princeton yells her tiger. Wisconsin, her varsity. And they gave the same old rah, rah, rah at each university. But the yell that always thrills me and fills my heart with joy is the good old Oski wow wow that they yell at blank.
I mean, why did they mention Wisconsin?
It's a Big Ten school. Oski wow wow.
Illinois.
Yes.
Bam! This guy is the true czar of college football is with us tonight.
Illinois. I was like, it had to be someone old. They're mentioning Princeton. Anyone mentioning Princeton in today's college football is.
I saw a shirt. I saw a shirt about that 10 years ago. I want to say 10 years ago ish.
Stuck with him forever.
Yeah, and I because I got it wrong then. I was like, what is this? And then I learned kind of that there was an association, but it's been a minute. But wow, okay, lucky guess.
All right,
one for
here's
one.
Number two. We shall sing and be glad with the days as they fly, in the time that we spend in thy halls, and in sadness we'll part when the days have gone by, and the path turns away from thy walls. It's getting depressing. Till the waters no more and thy river shall run, till the stars in the heavens grow cold, we shall sing of the glory and fame thou hast won, and the love that we bear for old gold.
That's Michigan.
Iowa.
Oh,
close, but the old gold especially.
Old gold.
That is just one of the most depressing hymns.
I feel like Michigan, doesn't Michigan have "We Shall Sing and Be Glad" in theirs as well? I think that
is correct.
I think they have that one. That's what I was kind of.
Iowa's is just all about death, apparently, though.
You said gold, so I should have picked up on that. That was bad.
And in sadness we'll part when the days have gone by.
That we shall the be glad part is also in Michigan, though.
Got it.
Okay.
To thy colors, true we shall ever be. Firm and strong, united are we. Rah, rah, rah. For Sky U Ma.
That's
rah,
Minnesota.
Rah, rah.
That's Minnesota.
For the
Sky U Ma, yeah.
Just nonsensical language.
Yeah.
It's called the Minnesota Rouser. All right, you're 2 for 3.
2 for 3.
I got 2 more.
Okay.
Watch the points keep growing. Blank teams are bound to win. They're fighting. I said blank teams are bound to win. They're fighting with a vim. Rah, rah, rah. See, their team is weakening. We're going to win this game. Fight, fight, rah, team, fight.
I don't know this. I'm gonna make a mean guess.
Give me a school that would use the phrase fighting with a vim.
I don't know about that, but that sounds like the dorkiest lyrics I've ever heard. These are all Big Ten schools?
Yes.
The dorkiest Big Ten school is Northwestern. Is it Northwestern?
No. Your statement is true. Your answer is wrong. But it's Michigan State.
Oh.
And this felt like a white person trying to make a hip hop song, like this was it's like a bad rap video.
To be fair, the line was "Watch the points keep growing. Spartan teams are bound to win," which you would have obviously gotten
Blank
quickly.
teams are bound
Okay.
to win.
Okay.
See, their team is weakening. We're going to win this game.
I mean, it's so literal.
It's so lame.
It's like a chatbot wrote it. Okay.
AI fight song.
Yeah.
All right. The final one. You're what, 2-2?
2 and 2.
2.
Yeah, 2 and 2.
All right. This is the decider. Our teams are there with bells. Their fighting blood excels. It's harder to push them over the line than pass the Dardanelles. So, victory's the cry of blank. Our leather lungs together with a rah, rah, rah. And o'er the land the loyal band will sing the glory of blank forever. I think your hint here is the Dardanelles.
I have no idea.
Second hint, new Big Ten team.
Oh, yeah, new Big Ten, one of the 4. The victory's the cry of blank. Our leather lungs together with a rah, 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 and o'er the land the loyal band.
I have no idea.
What even are
Well, if you knew where the Dardanelles was, it's Washington, okay?
Washington.
I actually don't even know if it's pronounced the Dardanelles. It might be Dardanelles, could be French.
Wow.
But that is
That's
just
tough.
the bizarreness of college football in a nutshell. I mean, I wouldn't have known any of these.
We've been doing videos. So for people out there who are interested in more of what we do, this is not
Of
me trying
course.
to promote anything, but this I promise you I'm tying this in. The beauty of college football is that so many of the traditions that we hold very dear all started by accident.
Yeah.
They all started just with dumb kids with like weird things that people decided to go with, and we've been trying on our like social channels and whatnot to highlight some of those this off season, because it, again, like I said earlier, we're big on the whole charm factor with college football, and so many of these things they start by accident. They give college football its charm. They make it special. These fight songs, I think, are no exception.
Yes.
You get these odd lyrics that are like, what?
Yes.
It's written like 1820. Like, what? Okay, I don't know what any of this means
Telling you,
anymore.
amazing.
It
Songs
has no
back then.
it is no current day context, but you find this throughout the sport. It truly is what makes it unique and the best.
Love it.
It's-
I'm going to turn this into a promotion for you, though, Ty. We've got 1,200 people are still listening to us at 9:30 at night on a Thursday.
Yeah.
It's absolutely fantastic. For those who are listening, check out Solid Verbal. It's fantastic. Go to Spotify, go to YouTube, check it out across all the Twitter, Facebook, every channel that you could possibly follow on. Patreon. What else am I missing, Ty? Where else can they follow you guys?
We're everywhere, man. I mean, anywhere you can find a podcast, just look for the Solid Verbal. Our website, solidverbal.com. You can go there. You can read a little bit more about our backstory. But whatever social platform you're into. I haven't cracked Snapchat yet. I'm not really sure how to use that, but everything else we've kind of figured out. And we've been really pushing hard this off season. We'll continue pushing hard as the season gets here. But our community is known lovingly as the Verballerhood.
Ballerhood.
And we would encourage everybody out there listening at home, if you love college football as much as us, if you want something that is lighthearted but informative, and hopefully something that can give you kind of the broad brush of college football with what's going on in the national conversation and whatnot, all are welcome. We'd love to have you, and just look for us wherever you get your podcasts.
Absolutely. Love it, man. All right. Well, so to the 1,200 as we leave, this is going to be a one-word answer, yes, no, or maybe. We always believe this is the year, every single year I go in thinking we're going to win the national championship every year until we lose, which is usually like September 1st. Unbelievably. Yes, no, or maybe. Last question, and I promise we'll let you go.
No maybes.
No maybes? Just yes, no?
No,
Well,
Yes, no. This is a
okay.
binary thing here, Andrew.
Will Nebraska win a national title in our lifetimes?
Define lifetime. define lifetime? Are we living to 100, 120?
Existence of the Earth. No.
Yes.
How-
no.
50 years.
50 years.
50 years is a long time.
It's a long time.
I mean, who am I to say no? Yes.
Yes.
Sure. Yes. Come on.
That's
We're
as
gonna clip that.
confident.
I don't want to be
Clip
on the
that.
side of no. I'm on a Nebraska show. Yes.
We're going to
of
clip
course
that.
yes.
We're going to edit that out.
That's the clip.
Ah,
That's the soundbite.
That's the clip. Edit it out. Sound like that. Ty thinks we're going to win the national championship at some point in our lifetimes. We won't
Yep.
say it was 50 years. We'll cut out all the pauses.
Great.
Headline
He
it.
thinks we're going to win.
Great.
Ty,
That's
thanks so
perfect.
much for joining us. Really appreciate it, man. It's been a pleasure to after 10 years of listening to you, it's wild to talk to you for an hour and a half. So really appreciate it. Thank you.
Hey, absolutely, guys. And let's do it again at some point once the season starts up.
We'd love that.
That'd be fun.
All right. Thanks everybody for listening.